Welcome, guys, back to the Capitalized podcast. And today we have with us a special guest. Vila Vaklin is an expert from DFI, Digital Investment Facility, an organization that focuses mostly on supporting green and digital infrastructure investments across Africa. I'll let Vila give a brief introduction about himself.
Thanks for having me, first of all.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so my name is Vila Vaklin. I'm originally from Finland, but I have been living in Nairobi, Kenya for a bit more than 4 years now. And I've been working on different kind of projects and things in East Africa for more than 10 years now.
Okay.
My background, non-techie at all. I'm the most unlikely person to work in the digital infrastructure space. I come from probably Finland's less techie family.
So how does one find himself specifically in the most complex and integral sector in time when it comes to tech?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of it's about coincidence. I started off as a musician. Back in the days when I was in my early 20s, it was still quite easy to get whatever job and then, at McDonald's or whatever, and then save some money, live a good life. It was, Finland at its peak. So it was, I think the quality of life was great. So I did that for a long time. I was working whatever jobs I could land, and then my one dream was to be a musician and a rock star in one way or another. So I was going after that dream for the first, I'd say, 5 to 7 years of my adult life. And yeah, so then I was also traveling a lot back then. So I developed this huge affection and love towards the African continent. So as just a young traveler hippie.
Yeah.
And then I came up with this other second plan or second dream for myself, and that was to do something that's remotely meaningful somewhere close to the equator.
I mean, music too is meaningful, but also tech also finds a way to see itself right there.
It is. But back then, I still, tech wasn't in the cards for sure. So yeah, then there was another detour to the education sector. I studied education, and that led to for me to work in different kind of refugee camps in the education field in Uganda and different parts of the world. And little by little, I grew really tired of your traditional development sector and struggled to get out for a while. Then landed a job at one of the tech recruitment startups here in Kenya. Then, as it usually goes, when you try to do something different, first it's really difficult, but then you start getting these opportunities little by little, and eventually they pile up. Then I changed one more time to another talent acquisition company, and then I could get this offer about investing in data centers, and I'm like, okay, sounds super interesting. I've been reading about data centers lately, so this must be something that is timely and relevant to this day and age. So I was like, okay, let's go for it. And got the job and started learning really, really quickly about digital infrastructure and data centers in general.
Prior to, as you say, prior to getting the offer when it came to digital infrastructure, what prior knowledge did you have in terms of data centers? Was it something you're familiar with, or once you heard about it, it's like, yep, I'll probably learn about it on the job? I mean, yeah.
I'll be super honest, because that's also my brand. I want to be what you see is what you get, guys. Yes. So I had one sentence of knowledge about data centers, and that was they are sort of like the hard drive of internet. That's much I knew.
I mean, it got you the job, yeah?
Yeah, got me the job. And it's also a Finnish organization that hired me, so there aren't an abundance of people who understand about data centers or digitalization in broad terms, and at the same time have experience in Africa and working in Africa and being comfortable navigating in these countries. So I guess this latter part got me the job, not so much the one sentence. But you can learn quickly if you have the motivation and the humbleness to do so. If you're willing to listen, willing to network, willing to accept the fact that you don't know anything or you don't know much from the get-go. Yeah.
I mean, as Seneca always says, the only thing I know is that I know nothing.
Yeah.
Yes, but let's jump right into it. When it comes to data centers, one, I'm going to start specifically from a broad overview in terms of Africa, and then begin to drill down into the various regions.
Sure.
So how would you compare Africa's current position compared to the global market when it comes to the data centers capacity or infrastructure?
It's minimal. I think less than 1% of the data center capacity globally sits in African continent at the moment. African data centers really battle with very different set of challenges, and some similar, some different to their global competitors or the global data centers. I think if you look at Europe, for example, you look at the challenge of power, perception, permitting, land, that type of thing.
Yeah.
But the demand is not really an issue. Like if you get those things right, the likelihood is that you will be able to fill your data center quite quickly. Here, on the other hand, if you count out South Africa, the demand is a big issue. Like how do you monetize the demand? How do you find customers and clients for the data centers to take up the capacity?
I mean, apart from as you mentioned, South Africa, but beyond South Africa, what other regions would you say are key players spearheading the digital infrastructure space?
In Africa?
Yes, in Africa.
Yeah, I'd say at the moment 5 major countries. Of course, South Africa being the one. One of our clients gave me a really eye-opening statistic. I think in Kenya at the moment you have $1 billion worth company.
Yeah.
In Nigeria you have about 6, and in South Africa you have 133.
That's quite startling difference.
Maybe plus minus 5, but anyway. So it's there you kind of like you can understand the big difference between these different markets. But yeah, I mentioned Nigeria. It's one of the fastest growing markets. A lot of data center players there already, but they do have massive challenges with their grid, the power reliability, and policies, regulations, and like the whole operational environment in Nigeria is of course tough, but at the same time super potential.
Yeah.
Kenya, of course. I think this is the hub, I know this is the hub in East Africa. A lot of the economic activity come through this country and then spread out elsewhere. Then you have Egypt, where you see a lot of movement, and then Morocco. It's really picking up this and last year and in the recent years. So I'd say these five countries are leading the market.
I mean, as you say, South Africa. What would you say are some of the benefits South Africa gets to reap from the fact that they have a heavy investment when it comes to digital infrastructure and the existence of the digital infrastructure facility that these other regions are missing out or could potentially benefit from if they had access to the digital infrastructure?
Sorry, I missed the first point, first part of the question.
As you put it, specifically South Africa is leading when it comes to digital infrastructure. So what would you say are some of the benefits South Africa specifically has been able to reap out from that compared to the other regions due to their lack of infrastructure?
Okay, I think there's a lot of manufacturing in South Africa. A lot of different industries are really blooming, and there's a long history with that as well, and also international trade and all that. I don't claim to be a specialist in South African economics, but when you go there, you see kind of that demand at international level, companies that are also operating not just in this continent but globally. So I think that still keeps them up ahead of the curve on the African continent perspective. And I think, Kenya, for example, has a good chance to catch up fast if you get the policies and few things right.
A few things right, especially the power. I mean, that's
the power. Yeah.
Exactly. I actually had a visit over to a recent data center that was recently constructed along Mombasa Road, and I think they're actually doing close to 3.5 megawatts, and they're probably in the process of building another facility. But then getting to see the amount of power coming in and understanding how important access to 99% of power in terms of uptime it's non-negotiable when it comes to building data centers. Yeah. So I was actually going to ask you, in terms of policies, what do you think? So I'm going to start with what are the right things, particularly the European market and US got right, because I do know the US has close to 5,000 plus data centers. Quite in the numbers. So what do you think they got right during the early phase or the early construction period?
First of all, the demand was there, so I think that's something. If we talk about Europe, which is more familiar to me, of course, US is a different beast. They are leading the AI race. They are leading. That's where 60% of the data center capex is going currently. But even Europe struggled with the similar things with harmonizing policies, and before they understood what it takes to create harmonized policies, regulation, permitting, they started building these data centers at scale, and many of the projects kind of hit different kind of walls. So I think now Europe has been able to work towards more harmonized continent-wide policies, especially within the EU. Right. So I think that really helps. Then if you get that right, I think you will end up in a situation where you can think beyond countries and you can start serving and thinking about kind of continent and region-wise. Yeah. So I think that's an important point, which I really wish to see also in this continent. And as I think I mentioned before, it doesn't have to be necessarily like continent-wide, because Africa is 54 countries. Like harmonizing all those policies and regulations will take some time.
Yes.
It's a task.
It's a task.
So why not start at least as East Africa as one region and try to get it right in terms of power transmission and data flows and all that, even payment systems, and I think that would already unlock a lot of things. But that's a work in progress. Yeah. I don't think you really have that yet.
All right. And what about in terms of some of the challenges, or not necessarily challenges, but some of the errors specifically the European market made along their journey?
Yeah. I think many European countries also, they underestimated the public perception that has already been turning against data centers in most of the countries, and that's of course due to few reasons. Of course, the environmental constraints and like how data centers and the energy powering it will impact the climate change and all that. But more than that, even I think for individual person, you see the price of electricity going up, and that's how they see it. It's true in certain parts of Europe, not everywhere yet, but the perception is that these data centers are just energy hungry vampires that are going to make our lives worse and more expensive, and without really understanding that data centers are really the backbone of their lifestyle, because everything is digitalized these days. All your payments, all your entertainment, whatnot, your social media, and I think data centers are detached in many ways from their kind of life and the way they interact and do things. And I think that's one, by the way, misconception that should be fixed, to create a link to individuals' life and decisions and kind of the way they spend their life, and than to, understanding that this is not happening in the cloud, abstract cloud somewhere, but actually in the physical infrastructure.
I mean, you actually brought up something really interesting. You mentioned how most of the public's perception is that data centers seem to be perceived as these power-hungry vampires.
Yeah.
But then, now given the fact that Africa is more or less poised in a really unique position, given that it has access to enormous amounts of green energy. I mean, look for instance, Olkaria, where KenGen is set up. They're currently mining close to, not necessarily mining, but harnessing 93% green energy when it comes to hydroelectrical energy. So how can we leverage that? How can we use that to our advantage and more or less use that to skyrocket or benefit from that, or avoid some of the areas in terms of power constraint that other markets face?
I think that's a huge advantage. I've heard statistics that Kenya's grid is 95% plus green and renewable. So when you think about foreign investors, that's especially the European DFIs, they are looking at their ESG compliance systems, and they see renewable energy powering data centers. They already see potential. They get interested, and then there's also land available and all that. So I believe these factors together make Kenya, for example, really attractive investment destination, and potentially also kind of outsourcing destination for some of the AI workloads in the future. Because that's, until there is some kind of nuclear powered solutions for data centers, they will, be big. There will be big emissions coming out of data centers.
I mean,
currently
as we speak, I am aware of the $1 billion deal signed by Microsoft to build a data center on Olkaria, and we can see slowly by slowly foreign organizations. I don't know. I'm a bit iffy about that, but I won't get. We'll get more into it behind the camera.
Yeah.
But we can slowly begin to see other or foreign corporations begin to invest slowly by slowly into the African market, specifically Kenya and other top regions. Now, my next question was actually going to be centered around not only power, but also the cables necessary to transmit the fiber. I am aware Safaricom just recently signed a deal with Meta to be able to transmit data fiber in terms across the continent. Do you think also, beyond just simply data centers, do you find data cables to be also integral keys when it comes to the control, the construction part when it comes to data centers?
Definitely. If you think about the fundamentals that you have to have, like as a fundamental, when you start building a data center, you have to have the connectivity. That's really the number one, of course, power following. So it is the key. What I would like to see is really expand that fiber access beyond just the tier. I don't know like how they actually put those layers, but tier 1, tier 2 markets, but further and really make meaningful access to internet and devices available for the next tiers of customers, future customers. I think that's also a massive gap here. It's the last mile, and do they call it mid-mile after that?
Mid-mile, the final stretch.
Yeah, exactly. So it plays a big part. And how do you get that done? I think is $1 million question, and that's going to unlock the next billion users for internet.
Now, one of your key specialties is matters concerning early stage structuring. Now, I like to understand when it comes to moving an idea from 0 to 1, from a bare minimum concept onto a fully investable and bankable idea. What would you break that down for viewers? What would you say are the steps necessary, or the steps that each organization has to pass through as they're moving from zero, a basic idea, into a bankable project?
And we're talking about data centers.
Data centers, yes.
Yeah. So I think we spoke about the fundamentals already. You need to have connectivity figured out. You need to understand how you will plug that connectivity into your data center. You need to have the power thought of, where the power lines are going and how you will connect to them. Two major things. And I think most of the time people get that right. At least they've thought about it, and on theory level, there's some plans around that. Then, of course, understanding the permitting, like how does that work? It will help if you've delivered something similar previously. That's also what many of the investors look at. They actually look at the team, not even so much the
history of the team.
Yeah, the history of the team. Have they been able to figure it out before? But I think after that, at last, even before that, you have to start thinking about how do you monetize the demand. And that is the big gap in most of the project pitches we have. There isn't a realistic pathway to how you monetize the demand in many of the data center projects, and this is something that we have been focusing during this year even more and more, making people understand, the developers understand that this is like, forget everything else, like you need to have this thought of. 2-3 years ago, it was enough to kind of have a plan to build for the data centers. For the hyperscalers, hyperscale ready facilities, and trust that they will come. If you build them, they will come. But I don't think there is an investor in the market right now who's going to give you any money with that plan without some proof that you actually have some anchored offtake. Demand. I'd say this is really the key.
I mean,
and of course the location. I guess location is an umbrella for power and connectivity. But yeah.
But I mean, as you say, because I more or less see it as a catch-22 situation whereby, as you mentioned, there has to be existing demand for there to be the constructions of data centers, and for you to build data centers where you're supplying, there has to be someone you're supplying to, and there has to be demand.
Exactly.
So how do you balance that? Because I mean, what's the middle ground? Do you first ensure that there's demand, then construct data centers, or build the data centers with the hope that demand will come? Like, how do you balance that?
I guess it is a balancing act, and I feel you completely. And having said all that, I really feel for the developers at the moment, getting all those no's from different investors because they don't have the anchored offtake, they don't have those offtake agreements. So that's it's tough, and you need to be strategic. You need to be get out there and get those EOIs, LOIs in, and create a credible plan to show for the investors that, hey, this is how it's going to work. So I don't think there's a shortcut, and there isn't an easy way at the moment. And who knows? Like we might be in a totally different situation in 2 to 3 years when even some of the hyperscalers have been, maybe they built the capacity in the US that they plan to build, and they've reached the AGI and all that. Then maybe the focus may shift more towards this continent, and maybe then you have a bit more abundant set of opportunities when it comes to the demand.
Hopefully as time goes by, the solution will begin to solve itself. Hopefully it's time.
And I have to say that in the beginning of this year, I was really skeptical. I started seeing that, hey, like this hyperscaler talk is this empty hype, and there's few pops here and there, points of presence in different regions, but apart from South Africa, of course, but not the scale that these data center operators are looking for. Like during Q3, Q4 this year, I keep hearing more and more these rumors, whispers that things are actually starting to move. Not still at the massive scale, but some megawatt scale. So, and this is outside South Africa. So I feel optimistic that this change is slowly starting to happen.
All right, and beyond being able to get the revenue projections, or more or less the business plan on how the data center is going to generate revenue, what else would you say is some of the things that most teams get wrong?
I think it's the pitch, the old pitch that we will build and the hyperscalers will come. I think that's the biggest wrong we get. And then I think a good point, and there's differing opinions and perceptions on this, but like the size of your data center. There's a lot of talk, speaking on behalf, smaller edge data centers, more spread out, also in the tier 2 markets. But then there's some people who think that we should build at scale, like, and have these regional data centers, 200 megawatts plus, and let them serve the whole region. But I think it's what I've seen some companies get wrong is really to build too big data centers in a slightly wrong locations where there isn't much of demand available. So I think size is something, and these days we always say that try to build in a modular way. Start with small, fill it up, and plan for the ramp up to more capacity.
I was actually in chat with one of these corporations. They're called Navon World.
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they have a really interesting concept whereby they're building small, more or less small modular data centers that so picture this, a huge chunk of land, but instead of building this huge facility, they have small isolated segments of the land that are built with small data centers running on green energy. And I found that really to be innovative, because now you see you get to balance. You're not just building this huge facility with the anticipation that a hyperscaler will come and consume.
Yeah.
You could slowly begin by from one small facility onto another. And for me, I think that could be something that builders or developers could begin to implement or more or less take into consideration. Rather than setting up this huge $50 million facility, you could begin by slowly, more or less breaking it down into small chunks.
Yeah.
And then something I'm actually thinking about, instead of, and it's a question I like to bounce off ideas, instead of most of the regions waiting for hyperscalers to come in, why? And this is something that Cisco is actually trying to solve. What about the concept of building more or less local cloud? Because I feel like that wouldn't be the silver bullet, but it could help more or less provide an anchor clients for the data center setting up as they wait for these hyperscalers to come on board.
I think it's a brilliant idea, and there's few companies trying to implement that already. There's a company called DevBox, we organized these catapult accelerator programs kind of on a quarterly basis, and they were actually now pitching in our event in AfricaCom. I unfortunately missed that pitch, but but I want to, maybe you can invite him to speak about this, because it's a super interesting concept, but I haven't been getting into the details enough to kind of understand what are the biggest pain points for them to scale. But in my understanding, it's starting to work. They are getting some clients in and some traction, and they are looking to scale to different regions. So there you go. I think really catalyzing that local demand is a key as well, which I understand you are also trying to do at Syscom. So while waiting for the hyperscalers, who will one day come, we don't know when, we don't know the time frame. The time frame is one day. So why not really start building and innovating around how to catalyze the local demand, kind of that hidden potential there, which I'm sure also exists in Kenya. Companies that could be your potential clients but haven't really digitized themselves yet. Yeah.
I mean, as you can see, I don't know if it's within Canada, but one of the posters is we always ask ourselves, how could we ensure that the Nyama Choma guy can also harness some of the power of the cloud? And exactly. It's as simple as that, like how down to the smallest SME, how do we digitize them? But as you said, it's going to take a lot of work, because we're looking at first more or less educating them in terms of the potential of how IT or AI could be able to benefit them, and then slowly beginning to set up the infrastructures, educating them on how to harness them, and as years go by, we can more or less even generate the demand that even hyperscalers would probably use, or more or less would generate.
Exactly, and I think that's really what we can start doing now. Who will pay for it, and how does the business model work? I haven't figured out yet, but I think it has to be the future anyway.
True. Well, well, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on board. I guess that's it for today. Also, one thing I believe, but most of you probably already know, is that he actually also has a podcast known as Why You Should Care About African Data Centers. So beyond this, I'd absolutely advise you to go check it out. I'm pretty sure you'd find some really good content and something maybe also be able to pick a thing or two from there. Well, I guess that's it from today. Absolute pleasure having you on board.
Thank you. Pleasure.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Cheers.